Welcome back to the MovieBabble podcast. This week you've got myself, Collin, and I'm joined by Brennan as we break down the Avengers Endgame second record-breaking week at the box office, as well as newcomers The Intruder, UglyDolls, and The Long Shot. And as always, you can check us out online at MovieBabbleReviews.com. All right, so breaking down the top five for this weekend. In first place, no surprise, is still Avengers Endgame with $145.8 million domestic. It's about a 59.2% drop, but still going strong. In the number two spot is The Intruder, which opened to a cool $11 million. In the number three spot is Seth Rogen's Long Shot, opening up to a little over $10 million. And in fourth is the other big newcomer this week is UglyDolls, opening to $8.5 million, and Captain Marvel rounds out the top five with a nice $4.276 million. So Disney is still dominating. Avengers Endgame is still kind of destroying everything in its wake. It crossed $2 billion this weekend. The fastest movie to do that ever, doing it in 11 days, which is just absolutely insane. I believe that's almost a month sooner than the next movie. Avatar was the other previous record holder, if I remember correctly. Crossed it. It is pretty much unstoppable. I know I went and saw it for a third time this weekend. I don't know if you have anything new on it, Brennan.
Oh yeah, there's definitely a ton. I mean, these developments are pretty huge. Another 145 million and change this weekend, and that's just the weekend estimates, right? Tomorrow we'll get a more exact figure. What I was looking for this weekend is, firstly, how big is this movie going to drop? Because I knew that this is going to be definitely a movie that is quite top heavy, right? This is a film that is quite hyped up at the beginning. This is the type of movie that you need to see first weekend. If you want to go back and look at a film like Avatar, when it came out, it's a film that it's original property. It's a standalone. Well, I guess now it's not going to be next year with what's coming, but at the time it's a standalone. It's a one-off. It's a film that people didn't really know what it was. They just know it's James Cameron, big director, and they know that it is going to be something special in terms of special effects and what they're going to do. But that's a film that was more word of mouth. And what is amazing about that film is it only opened to 77 million or so at the domestic box office when it first came out, which is nearly 300 million lower than Endgame. But Avatar had a second weekend drop of 2%. And it went on to almost never have a weekend where it dropped more than 50%. It always stayed around 10 to 20% drops. And that's kind of how that film performed. It had legs. Now, Endgame's a very different monster. It's a very different beast. It's a film that you need to see first weekend. That's the must. You must see this film as soon as it comes out. Now, we know that there were a lot of theaters that were sold out last weekend. We know a lot of people got bumped to this weekend. We know there are a lot of people going back to see it again. And we know that this is just a gigantic film, so it's going to have a huge second weekend. But I was expecting around a 60% drop, and we got a 59% drop for Endgame. So it's pretty close to what I was expecting. But they made 357 million first weekend, so 59% drop. That's not too bad. They're still bringing in 145 million plus this weekend, which is good for the second best second weekend of all time, I'm pretty sure. I was keeping an eye out to see if they would beat The Force Awakens and get the record for the best second weekend. The Force Awakens had a second weekend of 149 million. Who knows? Maybe with the actual numbers tomorrow, it might be closer. We'll see. But I think that's something definitely to look for tomorrow.
Yeah, I agree. And I think we'll have a little bit of a clearer picture. But, I mean, as you said, this thing is massive.
Yeah.
There's really no stopping it. I don't think it's going to have just a really large margin overtaking Avatar. But I think at this point, it's still early enough in the game. It's still earning a ridiculous amount of money. I can imagine very few scenarios where this doesn't at least shuffle past Avatar in terms of worldwide gross by the end of its run.
Yeah, 100%. Another thing I was looking into today because I wanted to see what are the chances, like how much money is this thing going to make. So now we look at Endgame, it's at what, 2.18 billion rounded up, it's pretty much at $2.2 billion. The film is about 500 million, around 600 million short of Avatar right now worldwide. Because Avatar finished with 2.78. We have this film now at 2.18. I was trying to see how much money did Infinity War make after its first 12 days worldwide. So you had, because right now we're on the 12th day of Endgame globally. You look at Infinity War, and I was able to determine that the film made another 30% of what it had already made in its first 12 days and the rest of its run. So consider Endgame, another 30% of what they've already made, if they follow the same pace, that will blow past Avatar. That will definitely get them to 2.8 billion, and will definitely get them the record.
Yeah, and I agree. And I've seen some articles that are claiming that Endgame already has more repeat viewers than Infinity War did, which Infinity War had a pretty astounding number of repeat viewers in itself. And so I have no doubt that the fan base will carry it the rest of the way. And that's what superhero movies tend to have, a lot of repeat dedicated fans. Even we're in an interesting spot with Endgame, because not only do you have like the comic book fans and people that have followed these characters since before they were on screen, but it's been around enough that you have literally a generation of people that has grown up with these movies, and that this has been a constant in their life. So there's a huge base to get it over that hump and to actually dethrone Avatar.
Yeah, 100%. Now, 3 billion. I don't know yet, because I look at the numbers and it's quite astounding how much money it's making. I knew this was going to be a topic movie, though, obviously, but it still is going to have the legs. I'm definitely sure that to pass Avatar. But $3 billion, I don't know if it'll quite get there. I know last week we all were kind of in agreement that we were just kind of throwing it out there. We were like, yeah, sure, it'll hit 3 billion. But who knows? Do you think that it has what it takes to crack $3 billion worldwide?
I think it'll be close. I don't think it's going to be an easy task for it to accomplish, but Disney also really likes to, and Nick has talked about it before, Disney really likes their round numbers, and I wouldn't be surprised if they had a huge Labor Day push for the film as well. When you get to the end of the summer, I'd imagine they'll push it pretty hard again when Spider-Man starts to come out. You'll see a little bit of a bump from that as well. I think if Disney pulled all their resources together and tried as hard as they could get it to 3 billion. I don't think Disney will necessarily do that. We could be surprised if everything else this summer flops, then maybe.
Yeah.
But we are starting to get into a lot more competitive blockbusters. We have Detective Pikachu this week. Aladdin comes out at the end of the month. Godzilla comes out at the end of the month. So it's starting to wade into some heavier competition, which I think will be its biggest struggle, trying to hit that 3 billion mark.
Yeah, definitely. May is an extremely competitive month, and every year it's getting more increasingly competitive. We're kind of seeing the summer being scaled back a little bit. We're kind of seeing the big blockbusters start coming out at the end of April, and May really being that big month, in June as well. It used to be more of a June, July thing. I think it's kind of creeping back a little bit in the schedule, or maybe just summer's getting longer for movie fans. But I definitely think that this is a film that has the potential to get to 3 billion. If there's anything that will, it's this. But I don't quite know. I think what we have to see is how it performs this week in the weekdays. See if it takes big hits overseas this week. See how Detective Pikachu's gonna play against it. I think that's something that we should definitely discuss. How do you think Detective Pikachu is going to affect Endgame this upcoming weekend?
I think Detective Pikachu is going to take a large portion of its foreign audience, particularly in, it's not, Pokemon traditionally isn't from China. It's not based in China, but it is still very rooted, at least initially, in Japan and Japanese culture. It's massive over there. Beyond Pokemon is really big in America, but it's unfathomable like how much bigger it is over in Japan. And so I think it's going to struggle worldwide because Pokemon is a very global franchise. It's been around for almost 30 years at this point, and so it's got a huge fan base built in. This is the first real live action attempt with it, so I think Detective Pikachu's got a lot of steam to run on itself, got a large fan base to pull from. And so I could be surprised, and Endgame could still be in the number one spot next week. I wouldn't really be surprised if it was first or second, but I think Detective Pikachu is definitely going to take a pretty big bite out of its total gross.
Yeah, yeah, I could definitely, I definitely agree with you there. I think that Detective Pikachu looks like it's a film that has some steam. I think this is something that it's not a Sonic where I mean the trailer wasn't that great. The first Sonic trailer. It's kind of cool that the director has responded and said that he's going to change change kind of the footage, re-render his design. I think that's kind of a cool thing that he's open to doing and that he's going to pursue after all the backlash. But Pokemon is different. I mean, this film, the build up, the marketing, it's been successful. It's kind of starting to grow, and I think that Pokemon is just kind of a bigger property than Sonic overall as well, 100%. And this film, I think Pokemon is going to be I called it in my article. It's one of my bold predictions of the year. I think it's $1 billion picture. I think it's going to stun a lot of people how big it is. I don't know. Maybe it won't get there, but I think it's going to be a huge blockbuster. And I think this weekend is going to be a potential for $100 million opening weekend for Pikachu. Whereas Endgame, I think that you're right. It has a shot maybe at first next weekend, but personally, I don't think it will get there. I think it'll be a strong second. I'm looking at a 50% drop for Endgame next week, and it to come in with a little over 70 million.
Yeah, and that's kind of where I'm at. Detective Pikachu seems to be aimed a little bit more towards kids, so you may have that could either help it or hurt it. It's really a little too early to. I think it's a very hard movie to judge, just because it is unprecedented in a lot of ways, but it does have a lot going for it as well. So I have no doubt that it'll be a success. I just don't really know how big or how small of a success it'll be.
Right. I think that there's definitely a good chance for that film to be huge. I think Ryan Reynolds was definitely the perfect choice though as the voice.
Oh yeah.
I can't picture another. I don't know. It's weird. I haven't seen the movie yet, but the trailers really grew on me. The first trailer I saw, I didn't dig it right away. I mean, I like Ryan Reynolds, I do, and I like the Deadpool movies. I think they're a lot of fun. But I thought it was an odd choice. And then the more and more marketing I saw for the film, the more I heard the voice, the more I saw the trailers, more teasers. I thought it was kind of a perfect choice. This is someone who has box office draw these last couple of years. This is someone who doesn't make like he's approachable. I mean, he has a fan base. People like him. He's funny. So I think that was definitely the perfect choice to go for a film that it's a kid. It is geared towards kids, but you're gonna have the same person who plays Deadpool voicing Pikachu. You're definitely gonna bring in a bigger base with that.
Yeah, and I'd agree. And I think, when I first started the premise, I was like, that seems like kind of a dumb route to go with the first Pokemon movie. But yeah, when the first trailers came out, I saw like the potential in it. I really love what we've seen so far of how they've built the world of Pokemon, because that's something that I grew up with. I used to have, hundreds of cards, played the games on my Game Boy,
Mm.
and so it was really cool to see that brought to life. I'm excited to see it whether I get to it this weekend or after finals are over. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, it'll be exciting for sure. I think that it's definitely gonna make a splash. So number two this weekend was actually The Intruder. Made $11 million in its first weekend. Not bad on a production budget of 8 million. Kind of a horror thriller. I saw it. Uh, it's watchable for Dennis Quaid and what he does. He is hilarious, creepy, and outrageous at the same time. It's definitely a poor film. It's not well made. It's very it's cheap horror. Characters make the stupid choices. A lot of cliche within it, but I think you can find enjoyment in this film if you go with friends and you just enjoy Dennis Quaid's performance.
Yeah, this is a movie that I remember seeing a trailer for it. I think when I went to go see Us, and if I'm going to be honest, I completely forgot this was a thing until this morning when I saw the box office results, and I was like, "The Intruder, why do I know that?" Um, yeah, I mean, I'm always up for a good Dennis Quaid performance. even if it's in an iffy movie like this. I don't really know much about it, but it's had, we're in a weird spot performance wise where, yes, everything looks really small because Endgame is setting records and earning just ridiculous amounts of money. Um, but 11 million isn't a bad start for this.
Hmm.
It looks like it had an estimated budget of about 8 million. It's pulling in 11 million domestic. I don't necessarily know that this movie's going to have just a strong worldwide presence, but I think it'll make a decent amount of pocket change.
Yeah, for sure. And I was quite surprised this weekend because I thought definitely Long Shot would be a film to beat Intruder. I thought Ugly Dolls would maybe have a chance to be above Intruder. I was quite surprised to see when the numbers came out that the Intruder was number two this weekend. I think horror is just something that people it's so watchable for people. Horror films. There's such a base out there that when there's a horror film out, they'll just see it. I think it's a good time. Like perfect date night type of movie, right? You just go see a horror. That's kind of, I mean, rom-coms as well, but I mean, horror is also something that people go to. So I think that's definitely what helped this film. But I was really surprised when it came second above Long Shot.
Hmm. Yeah, and that, Long Shot, just kind of transitioning there. It's a movie that I've been aware of for a while, just because I follow Seth Rogen and he's been obviously talking about this for a while. Um, but I don't feel like it was marketed very well. It, and part of that is it's not a blockbuster, right? It's not going to have that same large backing that something like Endgame or like Detective Pikachu has.
Mhm.
But I feel like this movie was talked about a little bit when Seth Rogen and Charlize Theron like started with it. I heard a lot of good early buzz from it, and then I just never heard anything from it again until about a week ago. And really, all that was from Seth Rogen's Twitter.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it's definitely not the hit that they kind of hoped it would be initially. I'm not seeing an estimated budget for it at the moment, but I did hear something in the ballpark of 40 million for the budget.
Oh,
Um, I don't know how accurate that is, but
I
that's
hope that's not true. I hope not because a $10 million opening uh, in North America isn't good for a $40 million budget. That sounds something similar to the next movie we'll be talking about. But before we move on to that, Long Shot. I mean, it's getting good reception. It's getting good reviews. I've heard some good things about the film, 100%. And I am looking forward to seeing it at some point. I'm probably going to check it out on a Tuesday or something like that. But I would have expected this film to definitely do better. I mean, Charlize Theron. I think she's definitely a great actress. She's had such a great career, and it's an interesting choice for her to be in this film with Seth Rogen. I mean, Seth Rogen, he's got a huge fan base, right? That's one of the top guys in comedy. So I was quite surprised to see that only 10 million. I mean, it's if 40 million is the production budget, that's a rough opening. I think they probably would have wanted 15 to 20. But it's definitely a tough start for them. I don't know how much of a foreign draw this is going to have overseas. We'll see, but this is something we're going to have to keep an eye on for the next couple of weeks and see kind of how it does.
yeah, and it's a little surprising because it does have a lot of star power behind it. I mean, in addition to Charlize and Seth Rogen, it has O'Shea Jackson Jr., which is Ice Cube's son. Um, has Andy Serkis is in there. Bob Odenkirk from Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul is in there. I believe one of the Skarsgårds is in there. Lisa Kudrow's in the movie, and so you would think it would have at least a little bit more pull because it does have some pretty recognizable people in there. Um, but yeah, it's kind of not hitting with audiences. I know I've heard reviews. I've heard nothing but positive things about it. I'm excited to go see it. But it's just kind of underwhelming for the time being.
Yeah, 100%. So what do you say we talk about Ugly Dolls?
Do we have to?
That's a film here, $45 million production budget, which isn't bad for an animation. I'm quite impressed.
Yeah, and
Um,
it doesn't look, at least from the trailers, the animation doesn't look terrible. It seems to be decently on par with everything else. But yeah, continue.
and they have a lot of big names, right? They have people like from the likes of Kelly Clarkson, Nick Jonas, Emma Roberts, Ice-T, Pitbull's in this movie, Wanda Sykes, Janelle Monáe. There's a lot of singers in this film. Yeah, I expected this thing to. I mean, it's the second weekend for Endgame. Nothing's gonna have a great weekend, but I expected UglyDolls to at least get $10 million. It's kind of pulling a Wonder Park.
Yeah, and it's just a weird. I mean, it's a pretty. It seems to be a pretty cliched premise. I don't really think that they're bringing anything new to the table here. From the reviews that I've seen of it, they're not bringing anything new to the table here. And it's weird in the fact that it has star power, but it doesn't have necessarily like modern film star power. It
Right.
has a lot of musicians, a lot of people that you would probably recognize their voice or their face, but wouldn't really know who they were. Um, so I don't really understand why they went with those casting choices, but they did, and I just don't think, oh, Pitbull's in a movie. That's the movie I need to go see this weekend.
Maybe 5
Um,
years ago. I don't know.
interesting, interestingly enough, and we talked about this a few weeks ago, but the story is actually by Robert Rodriguez. So he didn't write the script, but he actually wrote the story that it was based on, which I think is just an interesting note. Kids' movies are not typically what you would associate Robert Rodriguez with.
Yeah. Let's just make sure the listeners know this. Robert Rodriguez. That's the the man known for Sin City and Alita Battle Angel, and I think he worked on Machete. So that's the person who wrote the story for Ugly Dolls.
Yeah. uh, I mean, so he did direct, I believe, the first three Spy Kids movies as
Okay.
well.
Yeah, you did.
Um,
Yeah, yeah.
but he hasn't. Oh, he actually directed all four of them, from what I'm seeing. Um, but he's better known for a lot of his more hardcore Sin City. He did some of the Grindhouse stuff with Tarantino, and a few other. I think Eli Roth was involved with those. Yeah, he normally does a lot more hardcore, violent action kind of things. So it's interesting to see see him going behind an animated kids movie. Um, it's another kind of dismal debut for STX. They haven't really had much in the way of hits this year.
Yeah, just the upside's been good for them, but
Yeah,
yeah,
they had the upside, but yeah, and we talked about this a few podcasts ago, but they're kind of coming off of Peppermint, Happy Time Murders, uh,
yeah,
a, a lot of dismal debuts for them. So I think unfortunately the upside didn't start a pattern. It is just kind of the anomaly, at least as far as Ugly Dolls goes. And they had the Best of Enemies earlier this year, and I think that's barely crossed the $10 million mark. Yeah, and just not a whole lot going for him right now.
nope.
So yeah, we can just kind of point out that Captain Marvel is in the top five again. Still feeling a pretty decent Endgame bump. At this point, we've talked about it pretty much 9 episodes in a row, so I don't think there's just a ton more to add there.
Yeah,
um,
it's making its money. It's a massive hit. The Endgame bump was real. We speculated that for a while. 9 weekends now, 9 weeks that Captain Marvel's been out. It's still number 5 in the box office this weekend. That's pretty good.
yeah, and just kind of one more MCU related note. So Endgame, right now, as of this weekend's estimates, is sitting at the number 2 highest grossing movie of all time, not adjusting for inflation. And so just interesting to point out that the MCU makes up currently half of those movies, which is, for a single franchise, it's very, very impressive. And I think it's just kind of a testament to how big these films really are, how much of a following they have, and just how many billions of dollars they'll continue to rake in. So right now, it's Endgame is in the number 2 spot. Infinity War is in the number 5. Was previously at number 4. The Avengers, the original, is at number 7. Age of Ultron is at number 9, and then Black Panther rounds it out at top 10. And what's also even more interesting to note is that, accounting for Avatar and Titanic, which Disney now owns. In addition to The Force Awakens, Disney holds 8 of the top 10 spots. Universal has Jurassic World at number 6 and Furious 7 at number 8. But yeah, Disney is kind of dominating in the billion dollar movie club right now.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Yep.
Yeah. And then we mentioned it a little bit. Brennan mentioned it a little bit earlier, but the Sonic redesign was kind of an issue this week. So they are making a Sonic the Hedgehog movie, and there was a poster released, I think about 2 weeks ago now. That gained controversy because they changed the Sonic design a little bit. He's a lot more humanoid. His hair, tail, like I don't really know what you call that. The back of his head was changed a lot, and so there was a lot of backlash when the first trailer came out this week. And the director came out on Twitter and said, we heard you. We're going to change it. So really, my question is, I admire the director and the studio that they're willing to do that this late in the game. I think it's admirable that they're showing an effort to listen to the fans and showing an effort to pump a lot of money into redesigning. But my question to you, Brennan, is: do you think it's really okay for there to be that much of a say before we've even seen the movie?
You know what? This can never be prevented. With a world that is dominated by social media, this type of thing can never be prevented. Fans will always prejudge. There will always be tweets. There will always be posts. There will always be rants about things before a movie comes out or before something comes out. I think that's something that's unavoidable. Now, is it okay? Personally, I think that it's a very tough thing to really put your finger on. I think this is a good question that you bring up because it's not something that I've ever really thought about. I mean, I'm personally one who never wants to. I enjoy trailers. I see trailers. I like to discuss trailers, but I never want to put a movie down completely because of a trailer, because you know that it's not the filmmakers necessarily that are designing the trailers, right? So for me, I don't love to prejudge movies based off just trailers. Personally, I don't mind prejudging the design. I don't mind that aspect. I think prejudging a trailer is a different story. I think the actual design of the character is something that you're allowed to discuss. That's just
Mhm.
my take. My take. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, I understand where people are coming from. I'm not claiming to be a huge Sonic fan. I think I've played the first couple in an arcade before, but never really done a whole lot with Sonic. Um, I just think it's an odd precedent to kind of set. And granted, we do have a lot of reaction to this. It's nothing that's really been new. So like going back before I was born, when Michael Keaton was first cast as Batman, caused a huge controversy because he was Mr. Mom, right? He wasn't Batman. He was this comedian. Thankfully they stuck to their guns and made one of the best Batman films to date. But I just think it sets an odd precedent when this late in the game. So the movie Sonic, the movie comes out in November. So that gives them a very short window to pretty much redesign the character for the entire movie. And we don't get to see the full picture. The director obviously made those choices for a reason, and so we may come to find in November that the world just doesn't quite feel right in the movie, or that because fans were so adamant that this was wrong before seeing the final vision, um, you know, it made it, the movie may be affected in terms of quality because of that. On the other hand, maybe because they are willing to take this step, the movie has better financial success. But it's just kind of a wait and see at this point.
Yeah, so the production budget was listed right now. It could change by the time the film comes out in November, and I'm sure it will now increase just due to what they have to do in redesigning the character. But it's $90 million, which initially when I saw that, I thought that that's not a bad number. That's definitely achievable. A $90 million budget is definitely something that you can beat. Um, uh, I think that this might help it. I think definitely it might help it, but I don't know how much it would help it. This is something that I think we're gonna have to wait and see. Definitely how it plays out. We have many months to go until then. Um, but it might be a mistake for them as well. I mean, we'll see, but it's an interesting situation for sure.
Yeah, I'd agree there. Um, it'll be an interesting one to watch. So yeah, other than that, we really don't have much new stuff. It's a busy and it's also a slow weekend at the box office just because everyone kind of gave Endgame their space. We'll have Detective Pikachu opening up next week, and then the summer movie season really kicks off from there. Like we mentioned earlier, we've got Aladdin. Later this month, we've got Godzilla, King of the Monsters. I don't know if there are any other like huge tentpole blockbusters this month, but we are getting into full swing of blockbuster season, and we'll start having a lot larger uh, box office weekends and smaller margins between the films, hopefully.
Yeah, I'm pretty interested to see what happens this month. I think this is a very crowded month. This was a perfect time for Endgame to capitalize and have a good second weekend. I'm interested to see how much they drop in the following weekends. I mean, uh, I'd like to see them start dropping under 50%, but I think it'll be around a 50% drop. But overall, this is a definitely a crowded month at the box office. You have Detective Pikachu. You're going to see the John Wick trilogy come to a close.
Hmm.
We're also going to have Aladdin, as you said, which could be a smash hit just because of the property, but also the backlash of that trailer as well when that came out. That might
Hmm.
hinder its success as well. That's something we'll definitely look out for. You have Godzilla, King of the Monsters coming out this month, which um, I'm a monster movie fan. I like Godzilla. The first film was slightly underwhelming. It was still fine in my opinion, but the trailers for this have been unreal in my opinion. I think they've been great. But Godzilla trailers are almost always good. uh, but we'll see how this film is. I think it'll for sure have a good first weekend. But it's a crowded time, and especially you look at that May 30 31 weekend when Godzilla's coming out. Rocket Man's coming out that weekend, and Ma is coming out that weekend. Ma, the
Hmm.
horror film with Octavia Spencer, and Rocket Man, the biopic on about Elton John. Imagine if that movie was as big as Bohemian Rhapsody. I don't think it will be. Not a. I really don't think it will be, but it's definitely has the potential to do great numbers. So we might have tons of hits this month. Also, Brightburn's coming up this month, which I'm pretty excited about. The James Gunn produced. I think his cousin and his brother wrote it. I'm not 100% sure, but there are
Hmm.
three guns attached to it. That's I don't want to say Superman, but that's kind of the what if he used his powers for bad? So I'm pretty excited for that film as well. It's going to be a pretty jam-packed month.
Yeah, and we've got a lot of crowded weekends in terms of films that aren't, you wouldn't necessarily stack them up side by side genre wise. I think definitely the weekend of Godzilla, Rocket Man, and Ma will be pretty close. And I also think Rocket Man has most of the creative team behind Bohemian Rhapsody behind it.
Oh, okay.
And I can't remember the director's name, but the director that filled in for Bryan Singer after his removal from the film is the director of this movie. Um, and then I believe the it was written by the same person or same team as well. Um, I mean, you forgot the biggest movie coming out this month is another Dennis Quaid epic, A Dog's Journey. Don't really know how you missed that one,
I'm
but
sorry.
yeah,
I'm sorry to all the diehard fans. I know it's kind of a sequel though, isn't it?
yeah,
Because
I think it
there was a
is.
there was a Dog's Purpose that came out 2 years ago, or 2 or 3 years ago, and Dennis Quaid was in that film as well. So
Yeah,
so it's kind of the Dog cinematic universe.
and then there's a couple others. We have The Hustle coming out, the Anne Hathaway Rebel Wilson comedy duo.
Yep.
We have Tolkien, which has been pretty controversial. Most of the remaining members of J.R.R. Tolkien's estate have come out against the film, so I think it'll be interesting to see how that pans out financially and critically. There's a indie movie that I've been eyeing for a while called All Creatures Here Below, and it's headlined by Karen Gillan and David Dastmalchian, and they are both Ant-Man people. She plays Nebula in Guardians. He plays Kurt in Ant-Man. I'm sorry, they're both Marvel people, but it's kind of their passion project they've been working on. It's gotten a lot of early buzz over the past year since they started debuting it at festivals, and so I'm excited to see that one come out. And then, yeah, like you said, Brightburn. Booksmart, which is Olivia Wilde's directorial debut, comes out at the end of the month, and I've heard nothing but positive things about that as well. So it looks to be a very good month movie-wise.
Yeah, for sure. I'm glad that you touched on some of those I missed. I think everyone knows what they need to see now this month.
Everything.
All right. Well, I think we're good.
Yeah, I think that pretty much wraps it up for this week. And then next week we'll be back with Detective Pikachu, possibly back with The Hustle and Tolkien as well. We'll talk about them no matter what, but whether or not they crack the top 5 remains to be seen. Thanks for listening to this episode of the MovieBabble podcast. As always, you can check us out online at MovieBabbleReviews.com and check back next week as we break down the opening weekend of Detective Pikachu.